Today I am reviewing Siege at Nem, a small print and play game, an X encounter style of war game. It is very small, as you can see. It is pretty much inspired by the postcard tradition of war games. And, well, this is a little larger than a postcard, but because I printed it that way, I think you can also print it just as a small postcard if you want it to be more portable. In any case, it is a print and play game, available for free, very light to print. It is not going to use much ink from your printer, and it is going to be easy to build. Not too many pieces, nothing crazy. You will, however, also need a deck of cards. Possibly, if you have them, a deck of tarot cards, so that not only do you have the correct symbols, that are in this case wands and swords, but also you have special cards for special effects such as the stars, the death, the moon, etc., etc. I have this beautiful deck of Shakespearean tarot inspired by the world of William Shakespeare. They work very well also because they create a certain feeling of magic. They work well in the fantasy setting that we have here. This is indeed a fantasy war game in which we're going to have an assault against the city of Nem, this city, and the defender of the city at the beginning of the game places his units within the city. Units are two-step units, one side at full strength and the other side at reduced strength, as you can see from the different numbers. And the attacker will come from the sea, will come with two ships that have the ability to bombard the city, and with a ferry that needs to reach one of these hexes here. And then enemy units of the attacker that are taken from this pool of units here, units can disembark and they can attack the city. Units of the attacker can only enter the land area from here, and they can only enter the city from one of these two axes, which are the gates. Defenders of the city can get in and out of the city from the gates, but also from secret passages that are indicated by that symbol there. The leader of the attackers is the Baron, as indicated by this piece here. This is the guy at full strength. He is the first that needs to disembark from the ferry. Of course, other people can follow. He comes with a big troll, who is the strongest member of his army, and then he has a variety of generic units, also some leeches that have the power to deplete mana of the defenders. Mana is a source of energy that the defender can use to cast spells. Pretty much you have the defender that has the advantage of also having spells, and the attacker that has the advantage of large numbers and some really heavy hitters, some very strong units. The defenders win if they destroy the Baron, if they eliminate that piece, or if they eliminate both ships of the attacker, which can be done only through spells. There's no way for the defenders to attack the ships otherwise. The attackers win if they eliminate all defenders that are within the city, or if they take control of the citadel, which is that hex there, until the end of any turn. The game doesn't tell you what happens if neither of those conditions are met, if neither player wins the game by the end of the game. I assume that is a draw. That kind of makes sense to me after playing the game a couple of times. I would not assign victory to the defender automatically for surviving until the end of the game. Otherwise, the game becomes a little static, and the defender doesn't need to do much. It is much more exciting if the defender has to find the balance between defending key areas and having his units inside the city surviving, but at the same time also having the units move around and possibly exit from the city to try to attack the boats and to try to attack the Baron, the leader of the attackers. In any case, this is a card-driven game. At the beginning of each round, you draw a card from your deck. If you do not have a deck of tarot cards, then there is a conversion system. You can use any deck of cards, but these cards are much more thematic. If you flip a card that has once, then the card assigns action points to the defenders, a number of action points equal to half the number showed on the card rounded up. In this case, 5 becomes 3 action points. Action points can be used to move. Defenders inside the city or outside of the city spend an action point to move to an adjacent hex. Ships spend an action point to move to an adjacent hex. Land units of the attacker spend an action point to move outside of the city, but 2 hexes per hex inside the city. I guess they do not know the area very well, so they are at the disadvantage there. You can spend an action point to attack adjacent units. And you can also spend action points to cast spells. Spells are generated by cards that are inside the deck or part of the deck, for example, the Sun. When one such card is pulled out of the deck during the regular draw, that is the draw that you perform at the beginning of each round to see who gets action points, then the defender player receives that card, and that card can be used later to cast the spell to resolve the effects indicated by the spell. There is a little player aid here that tells you what the spells do. As you can see, you may be able to strike a ship, to regain points, that is, to flip units that have lost a step to their full strength, swap units belonging to Lassadar, which is the side of the defender, things like that. To cast spells, you need minds, which are the wizards of the game, I assume, to spend action points and also to spend mana. There is just a limited amount of mana, which is not regenerated until a special card is pulled from the deck, which is, in a tarot card, the Magician. If you're playing with a conversion, then it is another card. When the Magician is flipped, you do not have a regular round, you simply replenish the mana, the defenders get that advantage, and there's another card in the deck, which is, in the tarot card, the Strength. When that is flipped, the attacker gets to flip all of his reduced units inside the city to their full strength. When the card representing death is pulled from the deck, then this is the Magician that replenishes the mana. When the card representing death is pulled from the deck, then the turn is over. You reshuffle the cards and you start another turn. As the game progresses, new options become available to the players, and those symbols there on the turn track indicate precisely that. Starting from turn 2, the ships of the attacker can bombard rows of the city, or I must say columns of the city. You bombard all units that are in a single row. You need to roll a die. And if you are adjacent to the shore, it is more likely that you will be able to hit units that are within the city than it is if you're not adjacent to the shore. That's one of the options that you have starting from turn 2. Starting from turn 3, leeches that are inside the city will absorb mana from the defender at the end of each turn. Starting from turn 4, the attacker can bring back destroyed units as reinforcements, entering them from that hex there. And then, of course, very important, you have combat. Combat is not mandatory. Units of the active player can spend action point to declare combat against adjacent units. Units can also stack, and units of the defender only can combine their combat when they are fighting, their combat strengths. As you can see, there are 2 numbers on each counter, and one is attack and one is defense. The funny thing is that I'm not 100% sure of which one is which. The rules really don't tell you that. I assume that the number in the shield, that then corresponds to a number on a blank background for the defenders, the number on the shield is the defense. That would make kind of sense. Shield, defense. And the other number on the sort of circle is the attack. However, well, you know that in wargame tradition, usually you have the attack on the left and the defense on the right. There's also an indication on the play rate that kind of seems to suggest that the combat attack value is the one printed in the shield area. So I'm unsure about that. What I noticed though is that, as you can imagine, you will match, you will compare attack of the attacker versus defense of the defender in a combat. Well, many units have a larger number in the shield side of their unit, and lower on the other number. That means that if the first number is attack, now not in those cases that I'm showing you, but in most other cases, that is, for example, in like this case, if this number is attack, say, and the first number is attack and the second number is defense, in most cases you will have the attacker having a considerably higher amount of points in attack than the defender has in defense. That makes combat extremely bloody. That means that you have a huge advantage when you attack. If your attack is higher than the enemy's defense, combat will almost always result in the destruction of the opponent. That means that whoever gets to activate and to attack tends to win combat, and that gives huge importance to the order in which units are activated following the draws of cards from the deck. Of course, there's a card-driven game. It is important that the way in which you draw cards, the order in which they come off the deck will determine actions, but it just seems too huge. Pretty much any card that you draw off the deck, if the first number is the attack and the second defense, will destroy the opponent. Well, will inflict a step loss, but then you may have another activation and you attack again and you destroy the opponent. It just makes combat too bloody. What I prefer to interpret, and whether this is the correct version or not, this is how I played it, and this is how I want to play the game. This is how I like it. I like it better than the other way. It is that the second number is attack and the first number is defense. In cases such as this one, for example, you would have 3 in attack and 5 in defense if that guy is attacking the troll. Well, how do you resolve combat? The attacker in combat draws a card, adds half of the number indicated by the card. In this case, you would be a 4 out of 8. He adds that half of the number that has been drawn to the attack strength. This guy is attacking that guy, and then we have 3, and 4 is 7. You subtract the defense of the defender, in this case that's 5. You have a 2, positive 2. You look at the combat table, in this case you have the result of the defender losing a step. You flip, in this case, the card of the defender. Other results may be defender retreats and takes a step loss. Attacker takes a step loss. Attacker retreats and step loss. Nothing happens. Even like this, even using the higher number for defense and the lower numbers for attack, combat is pretty brutal. It's pretty violent. However, if you pull a face figure from the deck, then that is a miss for the attacker. This is pretty much a general picture of the game, of how the game works. What do I think about it? Well, I have a little bit of mixed feelings. I see potential. Of course, there are advantages. This is a little filler, war game filler, plays in half an hour or less. It has interesting elements that have been built into the system. You have the magic, you have the terrain. The two sides do play in different ways. They have different objectives. There are a lot of good things. However, it really seems that even when I compared this to other card-driven games that I played, the amount of luck involved here is higher than I see in the average card-driven game, and a little higher than I would like it to be. There are a couple of things that are unclear to me from the rules, and you kind of have to play with those and house rule things and tweak the rules to make the game fit whatever it is that you're looking for when you're playing this game. It feels a little undercooked. Now again, it is not that this game was on Kickstarter, collected hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then you expect a certain level of this or that. It is something that has been clearly made out of passion by the designer, and if it is a little undercooked, then if you're interested and if you see potential, then you finish cooking it yourself. You add whatever it is. As is, this is a game that has some gray areas when it comes to the rules, to say the least. but they can be fixed easily by anybody who is interested in the game. It has a theme that miraculously does come across to the mechanics, even if the board is so small, there is such a small number of units on the board. It does have some moments of actual tension. It does have some cases in which the game does become exciting. That doesn't always happen because the draw of the luck sometimes does throw the game completely out of balance and has such a huge role that pretty much seems to take away any role that the player's strategy may have. So, in a nutshell, my very final opinion is that this is a small game, this is a word game filler. Don't expect this to be epic in any way. As a word game filler, it is not bad. Not a bad one.